Yeah. Good evening and a warm welcome to one and all. We welcome you on behalf of the Medical Education Committee of Obstetrics and Gynecological Society of Southern India. We have been doing this webinar series, which is a brainchild of our president, Dr. Sampath Kumari. It's called Vivadam Webinar Series. This episode is the third episode, and the topic that we have chosen is the most important one because we know that preeclampsia exists from time immemorial. So there are a lot of treatment regimens that have been proposed, and they have come a long way. And we all now know that Maxwell regimen is one of the best regimen practiced all over the world, which is time-tested, evidence-based. There are two regimens of magnesium sulfate, administering magnesium sulfate. And now today we are going to deliberate on both the regimens, and we have experts from across the country and a moderator who's going to give us views about both the regimens. I welcome all the faculty and delegates once again for this Vivadam webinar series, third episode. Sampath Kumari Madam is our president, is HOD of Muthukumaran Medical College, president of Oxy, past president of Foxy, very dynamic person, very down-to-earth person. Madam has given us a lot of insights about how to take things forward in all aspects. Thank you so much. You can give the welcome address, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening to all. I welcome you all for this unique webinar, that is the Vivadam series. We will be discussing what is used in one hospital and what is used in the other hospital and what is the advantage and why it is not used in other places. See, everything depends on the own hospital protocol only, but still we want to discuss. So today we have taken, as Karpagambal was telling, the pre-eclampsia's magnesium sulfate regimen. So that this is from south to north. South, our Rajapriya will be presenting with Perchat regimen, and from Varanasi, Dr. Jyoti will be presenting about the suspend regimen. And our moderator being the Dr. Aparna, she is from the AIIMS. She will tell what are all the possibility and what is the advantage and the disadvantage. So depending on the place only we are using, still we should know what is the update. And thank you, and I wish you all the success for this program. I welcome all the delegates, and we have Dr. Karpagambal and Dr. Vijaya who are dedicatedly doing this program. Thank you, Vijaya and Karpagambal.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Next slide. Now we all are President Dr. Meena Mahalingam, who has also been a very dynamic person who has been instrumental in doing a lot of activities with Oxy. I will ask. Sorry, Meena? Secretary of Oxy will be saying the Oxy prayer.
Yeah. Prayer podriyada?
Prayer போட்டு உங்களுக்கு.
இல்ல நானே எடுத்து.
நீ எடுத்துறீங்களா? Yes, Meena, there on the screen.
Yeah. Thank you, God. In humility we gather. In gratitude, we pray for all the good things you have given us. Shower us with your blessings to pass on the healing touch, to celebrate the arrival of each new life and a mom reborn. The courage to deal with it all when things are not perfect, and to remember that we are but messengers to keep our women safe and free from sorrow. We bow before your kindness and the magnanimity of your endless love. Thank you. Over to you, Karpagam, for...
Thank you. Thank you, Meena. Next slide.
The proceedings.
Sahiti, the next slide. Yeah. Now I welcome Dr. Vijaya, who is the coordinator and chairperson of the Medical Education Committee of Oxy. Madam is HOD and Professor at ESI Medical College and Hospital, Chennai, former director of Institute of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Madras Medical College, past president of Oxy, and member of Oxy Medical Education Committee. Madam is a lot of special interest and one of the very dynamic persons we all know, and a lot of credits to her. Over to you, Vijay Madam, to say the welcome address and invite the speakers. Madam, you're muted, ma'am. What, madam?
Yeah.
Yes. Now okay.
Thank you, Sambat. Thank you, Meena and Karpagam. And for this a very different program apart from the usual webinar and panel discussion and talks. And this is like a sort of a debate and day-to-day practice what we use, the drugs and whatever the regimens and guidelines. It's really useful. For the past 2 sessions were also very, very good, robotic hysterectomy versus lap hysterectomy, like that. And now this is also very important because most of us use suspend regimen, and down south they are using the Pritchett's regimen. So which is advantages, which is not advantages, whether there is really the cumulative effect of reducing the eclampsia, that is what we want to know, apart from the pain and other the swelling and other of IM injections. And two junior consultants and very sweet, and they are today Juhi and Rajapriya are going to debate on this. I welcome both of you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Karpagam, are you
Yes.
introducing?
Yes, madam. First will be.
இது வந்து எம்ஆர்பி தான் நம்ம வாங்குறோம். பேஷண்ட் எம்ஆர்பி தானே வாங்குவீங்க.
Can you please mute everyone?
Can you please mute yourself, please?
Please mute everyone.
Yeah. First, Dr. Juhi. Dr. Juhi.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Juhi CV, please. Yeah, Dr. Juhi Srivatsava, Senior Resident OBGYN at King George Medical College, University of Lucknow. And she is an MBBS from ML Medical College, Prayagraj, India. And she has a lot of credits, a lot of accomplishments. And over to you, Dr. Juhi, to
Yes.
deliberate on the Pritchett regimens. You can share your screen. Chitragala, please mute others, no? Yeah.
Sri Vansa, டாக்டர்
Yeah.
என்எஸ் மகாலட்சுமின்றவங்க இது அன்மியூட் ஆயிருக்கு, அவங்க வந்து மியூட் பண்ணுங்களேன்.
Ma'am, பண்ணிட்டேன் ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
You can make it full screen, Dr. Juhi. Yeah, done. You can go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Juhi Srivastava, Senior Resident at SSL Hospital, BHU. Today, I'll be presenting a case on the critical obstetric emergency, severe preeclampsia, focusing on the role of magnesium sulfate, and we'll be discussing about the Pritchett's regimen. So before starting with the case presentation, I would like to highlight a few basic points about the hypertensive disorders in pregnancy. So as per the International Society for the Study of Hypertension in Pregnancy and ACOG guidelines, the hypertensive disorder of pregnancy is classified into 5 major categories. That is the chronic hypertension, gestational hypertension, preeclampsia, eclampsia, and preeclampsia superimposed on chronic hypertension. The key distinctive features among all these is the timing of onset and the end organ involvement. So chronic hypertension is the elevation of blood pressure to more than 140/90 mm of Hg confirmed on 2 occasions before 20 weeks of gestation or even before the pregnancy. Whereas the gestational hypertension is the elevation of blood pressure of more than 140/90 without proteinuria and after the 20 weeks of gestation. The preeclampsia is the elevation of blood pressure to more than 140/90 after 20 weeks of gestation, but there is proteinuria or signs of end organ damage. Preeclampsia with severe features is the blood pressure of more than 160/110 with proteinuria or signs of end organ damage. Eclampsia is the convulsive manifestation of preeclampsia, and chronic hypertension with superimposed preeclampsia is pre-existing hypertension with new onset proteinuria, sudden worsening of BP or end organ dysfunction, usually occurring after 20 weeks of gestation. So we are majorly discussing the preeclampsia with severe features. So as we know that preeclampsia at all begins with the defective spiral artery remodeling, which leads to placental hypoperfusion and causes the release of various pro-inflammatory proteins into the maternal circulation that leads to various end organ dysfunction, which is evident in the lab reports as thrombocytopenia of less than 1 lakh platelet count, elevated liver enzymes with transaminases more than twice of the normal upper range. Renal dysfunction is seen with the raised creatinine to more than 1.1 milligram per dl and 24-hour urinary protein excretion of more than 300 milligram per dl. Neurological symptoms like headache, visual disturbances, seizures, or the presence of pulmonary edema. So with this background knowledge, I would like to move on with the case presentation. I am presenting the case of patient Kavita, 29 years of age, resident of Shivpur, Varanasi. Her last menstrual period was 19th November 2024, and period of gestation on the day of examination, that was 28 June, it was 32 weeks. She came to our emergency with the chief complaints of amenorrhea of 8 months, generalized body swelling for 1 month, persistent headache for 3 days, pain in upper abdomen for 1 day, and reduced fetal movement for 1 day. Menstrual and obstetric history, she had regular cycles and conceived spontaneously. She is G2, P0, and A1. Her previous pregnancy ended in a spontaneous abortion at 6 weeks gestation age, which was not followed by DNC. History of present pregnancy. The first trimester history was uneventful, and she took the folic acid supplementation. Ultrasound and routine blood investigations were done, which were normal. She was advised anti-NB scan and dual marker, but she missed it. Then history of second and third trimester. She had a TETVAC coverage at 4th and 5th month of gestation. Quickening was felt around 5th month of pregnancy. Anomaly scan was done, which was normal. Quadruple marker was advised, but again she missed it. Notably, an elevated blood pressure was seen in her last ANC checkup, that was 3 weeks back at 29 weeks of gestation, with a reading of 140 by 90 mm of Hg. And she was advised to follow up after 1 week with home BP monitoring readings and salt restriction, but patient failed to follow up. And over the time, she developed generalized body swelling, persistent headache, and for the last 1 day, she had constant right upper abdomen pain and decreased fetal movement, with her daily fetal movement count reduced from 12 to 6. It was when she was taken to a private hospital where her BP was found to be 172 by 1 by 16 mm of Hg, and she was immediately referred to a center for better management and an ICU availability. No significant past and personal history. Family history is positive for first degree relative. Then on examination, patient was dyspneic, obese. She was well oriented to time, place, and person. There was facial puffiness and pedal edema. Her weight was 72, height 154 centimeter, and BMI came out to be 30.3. Pulse rate was 76 per minute, regular normovolumic. Respiratory rate was slightly higher, 22 per minute, thoraco-abdominal. Her blood pressure was higher, 76 by 120 mm of Hg. In right arm sitting position, and two similar readings were found 15 minutes apart. Temperature was slightly raised. The normal heart sounds were present, no added sound, and bilateral vesicular breath sounds were heard, there were no added sounds. Her reflexes were brisk. On obstetrical examination, on inspection, abdominal wall edema was present. Rest other inspection findings were normal. On palpation, the symphyso-fundal height was 28 centimeter. Fundal height was 30 weeks, which was slightly lagging with the date of period of gestation, that was 32 weeks. A slightly increased uterine tone and tenderness was present. Fundal grip was suggestive of breech. Lateral grip was difficult to palpate due to tenderness. And pelvic grip was suggestive of head, which was not engaged. Liquor appeared to be reduced. And the effective fetal weight on palpation was around less than 2 kg. Fetal heart sound on auscultation was 122 beats per minute, irregular, and the per speculum findings were normal. And on pervaginal examination, os was closed, cervix was posterior uneffaced with adequate pelvis, suggestive of that patient was not in labor. Her systemic investigation suggested of her blood investigation suggested of systemic involvement, with the urine protein dipstick positive for 3 plus. The liver transaminases were higher, more than twice of the normal value, which was 110 and 95. Creatinine was 1.4 milligram per dl. LDH was 720. Uric acid was 7.8. Rest other findings were normal. The ultrasound was suggestive of single live intrauterine pregnancy with 28 weeks, 3-day gestation. The effective fetal weight was below 10 centile for gestational age, suggestive of intrauterine growth retardation. AFI was mildly less, it was 5 centimeter. Placenta was posterior, and there was a retroplacental collection of 3 into 4 centimeter. Color Doppler findings. There was reversed end-diastolic flow in the umbilical artery. The middle cerebral artery PI was low, which was suggestive of brain sparing effect. The ductus venosus finding was normal, A wave. So based on the history, examination and investigations finding, my diagnosis becomes a female with 29 years age, G2P0A1, with 32 weeks pregnancy, with severe preeclampsia and impending eclampsia, with placental abruption, with intrauterine growth retardation and mild oligohydramnios with Doppler changes. So my management plan was to immediately stabilize the patient and then with continuous monitoring and if the time permits corticosteroid administration and a planned delivery. So my immediate goal was to reduce the BP cautiously and slowly. So the first line agents can be used are labetalol and nifedipine. Hydralazine can also be used in acute settings, and the target is to reduce the blood pressure to 140 by 90. Then my next important target was to stop the disease progression to eclampsia. So yes, Magself is indicated to prevent eclampsia in all the cases of severe preeclampsia. Magnesium sulfates acts by reducing the neuromuscular excitability. It increases the cerebral blood flow and therefore it acts as an anticonvulsant for the mother and neuroprotective for the baby. Now, there are two routes by which Maxilf can be administered, intramuscular and intravenous. I use the intramuscular, that is Pritchard's regimen in my patient. In Pritchard's regimen, the total loading dose of 14 grams is given as 4 grams slow IV 20% solution and the remaining 10 gram as deep intramuscular 50% solution, 5 grams in each buttock, followed by the maintenance dose of 5 gram deep intramuscular in alternate buttocks 4 hourly, and it is continued till 24 hours after delivery or the last seizure, whichever is late. Now, since the rate of occurrence of adverse reactions is more in the intramuscular regimen, it is very important to understand the relationship between this plasma magnesium concentrations and toxicity. So we know that the therapeutic range of magnesium sulfate is 4 to 7 milliequivalent per liter. At a plasma concentration of 9 milliequivalent per liter, loss of patellar reflexes occur and respiratory paralysis occurs at a concentration of 12 milligram per dl and cardiac arrest occurs at a concentration of 30 milligrams per dl. So it is important to monitor the following things during while administering the magnesium sulfate. It is the deep tendon reflexes by knee jerk, the respiratory rate that should be more than 14 per minute, and urine output that should be more than 30 ml per hour. Now, since the main route of the magnesium sulfate excretion is through the renal system, so therefore urine output measurement is very important. If the renal function is impaired, serum magnesium levels will increase quickly, which will place the patient at risk of significant adverse effect. The initial 4 gram of the loading dose of the magnesium sulfate can be safely administered regardless of the renal function. But in cases of renal dysfunction, we need to measure magnesium levels every 4 hourly. If the serum magnesium level is more than 9.6 milligram per dl, then we need to stop the magnesium and we need to keep measuring the levels at 2 hour interval and we can restart it when it is less than 8.4 milligrams per dl. For the mild to moderate respiratory depression, we can give calcium gluconate or calcium chloride 1 gram intravenously along with stopping further magnesium sulfate. But for those patients who develop severe respiratory depression, prompt endotracheal intubation and mechanical ventilation are life-saving. Side effects of magnesium sulfate is warmth, flushing, nausea, vomiting, muscular weakness, respiratory depression, and diplopia. There are certain conditions where the magnesium sulfate is contraindicated. It is myasthenia gravis, hypocalcemia, moderate to severe renal failure, cardiac ischemia, heart block, and myocarditis. For recurrent seizures, we can give additional 2 to 4 gram of magnesium sulfate, 20% solution, and slowly intravenously over 5 minutes. But in cases of refractory seizures, that is seizures occurring at 20 minutes after the bolus or more than 2 recurrences, we need to use some other agent that can be amobarbital, 250 milligrams IV in 3 minutes, thiopental, phenytoin, or if required, endotracheal intubation and assisted ventilation. So timing and mode of delivery. Immediate delivery, in my case, immediate delivery after stabilization is required. Lower segment cesarean section is preferred due to the reverse end diastolic flow, irregular fetal heart rate, and unfavorable cervix. So lower segment cesarean section was done. And in the Parov findings, a retroplacental 6 by 6 centimeter clot was found. There was around 1500 ml blood loss. 1 unit blood and 4 units FFP were transfused, and patient was shifted to ICU. For postpartum monitoring, we continued Maxwell for 24 hours uneventfully, and with the continuous monitoring of the blood pressure, urine output, and other blood parameters. And we need to watch for the postpartum eclampsia, fluid overload, and renal dysfunction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Juhi. Now, we welcome Dr. Rajapriya. Dr. Rajapriya CV, please.
Assistant Professor at IOG, Madras Medical.
Yeah. Dr. Rajapriya is an assistant professor at IOG, very young and dynamic assistant professor. Let's hear from her regarding our Zuspan regimen and how they use it in our hospital. Over to you, Dr. Rajapriya. You can share your screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And very glad to welcome Dr. Aparna also. Madam has joined.
Ma'am, is my slide seen, ma'am?
No, not yet. Not yet, Dr. Rajapriya.
Yes, ma'am.
You keep it in your desktop.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, now you can make it full screen.
Yes,
Make
ma'am.
full screen and then go ahead.
So good evening. I thank Dr. Sampath Kumari Madam, my director Dr. Sumati Madam for giving me this wonderful opportunity. And today I'm going to discuss a clinical scenario and management of an antepartum eclampsia patient who presented at IOG.
Just one second, can you make it full screen, Dr. Rajapriya? Just click the full screen icon at the bottom of the screen. At the bottom. Yeah, full screen icon. That's there at the bottom.
This one, ma'am. Slideshow.
You slideshow, you can make it.
Yes, yes.
Yes. You
What
can
you
make it
have
like
clicked
yeah, whatever, whichever one.
I have clicked the slideshow option, ma'am.
At the beginning, you put. Ma'am, please click on enable editing first.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
You share again, ma.
Yes, ma'am. Now it is it?
No, ma'am, it's stopped. You need to share once
Share
again.
again.
Yes, okay, ma'am.
Yeah, now please make it a slideshow, ma'am.
Slideshow.
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am, you need to stop share and share once again. Don't click on the slides, ma'am. Click on the screen and share again, ma'am. After clicking share,
Share, yes, ma'am.
then click on the entire screen. There is an option called entire screen.
Yes, ma'am.
Then click on the blue color share icon. Yes, ma'am. Now you please open the PPT. We can see your desk. Yeah. Now please go to slide.
Yeah.
Done.
Done. Super. Yeah.
So good evening, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity. So I am Dr. S. Rajapriya, Assistant Professor at IOG. So we'll be discussing about an antepartum eclampsia patient presented at IOG, a clinical case scenario and management. So patient profile, the patient name was Mrs. Radhika Sharma, 26-year-old patient residing at Chindadripet with obstetric code of Primi, gestational age of 32 weeks. Her antenatal checkup was fully at PHC and she lacked consistent monitoring during her pregnancy. She had no high BP records and recently she hadn't gone for any checkups for the past 1 month and there was no recent BP records available. So presenting complaints at the casualty, the patient was brought to casualty after experiencing one episode of generalized tonic-clonic seizures at home And the sudden onset of seizures is a critical indicator. And she presented with post-ictal confusion, facial injury, tongue bite, which are the common manifestations following a generalized seizure episode. And there were no prior epilepsy history. So there was no known history of epilepsy, suggesting the seizure was an acute event, likely linked to her pregnancy status. So as already Juhi madam had discussed, eclampsia is convulsions occurring in a pre-eclamptic women, and any seizure occurring first time during pregnancy, unless proved otherwise, should be taken as eclampsia. And at the initial assessment at casualty, the patient had a BP of 170/110 millimeter of mercury. Pulse rate was 100 per minute. Respiratory rate was high, 24 per minute. And dipstick urine albumin showed 3+ significant proteinuria. On examination, the patient was semi-conscious, disoriented. She had facial puffiness and bilateral pedal edema of grade 3. Per abdomen examination, her uterus corresponding to 32 weeks of gestation was relaxed, not tense, not tender. Head was mobile and fetal heart rate was good, 140 beats per minute. NST was reactive. So the diagnosis is antepartum eclampsia presenting at 32 weeks of gestation. So immediate management, first of all, we need to check the circulation, airway and breathing. So we need to first raise the side rails and shift tilt the patient's head to one side, and we have to do suction for any secretions if present. And we have to check her saturation, and if needed, oxygen should be given. And then after that, we have to give the initial magnesium sulfate regimen. So initially a loading dose of 4 gram of 20 ml of 20% solution IV over 15 to 20 minutes is to be given to rapidly control the seizures. So how to prepare this 4 gram solution is, the Maxelf available is 50% solution. So we need to take a 20 ml syringe, and each ampule of magnesium sulfate contains 1 gram, which is 2 ml. So we have to take 4 grams, that is 8 ml of magnesium sulfate, and dilute it with 12 ml of distilled water, which gives a solution of 20% solution. And it has to be given very slowly over 15 to 20 minutes to control the seizures. And if at all it is given very fast, then it leads to sudden bradycardia, and also even cardiac arrest occurs in the patient. So it should be given with caution. If we are scared to give directly also, we can connect it into a syringe pump and set it in to deliver it within 20 minutes. And then maintenance dose is in Zuspaan regimen, 1 gram per hour IV infusion is given. And then the BP was 170/110. So antihypertensives, the initial for hypertensive emergency, what we are giving is labetalol IV stat, that is 20 milligram stat is given to manage severe hypertension. And routine blood investigations, complete blood count, LFT, RFT, LDH, coagulation profile, spot PCR were performed to assess the organ function and severity. So first of all, understanding about the Zuspaan regimen for Maxelf. So Juhi madam had already explained about the Pritchard regimen, which is the totally intramuscular regimen. And this Zuspaan is an alternative to the Pritchard regimen, which is a intravenous Maxelf administration protocol. So as already said, the loading dose is 4 gram of magnesium sulfate administered slowly over 15 to 20 minutes, ensuring rapid therapeutic levels. So in Pritchard, we had 4 gram of Maxelf and also another 10 gram of IM. Here we give only 4 gram IV as a loading dose, and maintenance dose is given as a continuous infusion of 1 gram per hour for 24 hours, measured from either the last seizure or delivery, whichever occurs later, to maintain seizure prophylaxis. So how to prepare this IV regimen, IV infusion? So we can either use an infusion pump or a syringe pump. When it comes to the syringe pump, it is available as a 50 ml syringe pump. So we have to take 24 ampules of magnesium sulfate, which is 24 grams, that is 48 ml in a 50 ml syringe pump. And we have to set the flow rate at 2 ml per hour, which precisely delivers 1 gram per hour infusion. And this method ensures continuous and controlled infusion. And another one is this infusion pump, which is we have to dilute 4 gram of magnesium sulfate in 200 ml of normal saline and set it in an infusion pump to deliver 50 ml per hour, which gives 1 gram per hour. Or we can even take 50 gram of magnesium sulfate in 1 liter of normal saline and set it at 100 ml per hour, which will deliver 1 gram per hour. But what we use in IOG is the syringe pump method, that is 24 ampules we take in a 50 ml syringe and we set it at 2 ml per hour, which delivers 1 gram per hour. So this enhances the patient safety and management. Now, this is given for 24 hours continuously. The most important thing is we have to monitor her blood pressure, pulse rate, urine output, deep tendon reflexes, respiratory rate, saturation, and everything. And these should be monitored every hourly. Urine output should be maintained at least more than 30 ml per hour, and respiratory rate should be more than 12 breaths per minute. So as already Juhi madam has discussed about the magnesium sulfate toxicity, the therapeutic range for seizure control is 4 to 7 milliequivalents per liter. And when the toxicity level is reached, that is more than 7, the patient will start having one by one, that is loss of deep tendon reflexes, respiratory depression, and more than 12.5 or even more than 15, she'll be starting to have cardiac arrest. But initially, before the loss of deep tendon reflex, the patient will be having a loss of appetite, nausea, vomiting, perioral numbness, and all these signs will start occurring first before the loss of deep tendon reflexes. So once we see that there is a loss of deep tendon reflexes, we have to suspect magnesium toxicity, and we have to stop the infusion, and we have to give calcium gluconate IV. 10 ml of 10% solution is given IV slowly over 10 minutes. It is an antidote for MACSELF. And when the patient is in Zuspan regimen, suppose she throws another fit, then we have to immediately go for another 2 gram of IV magnesium sulfate. And there is also another IV infusion method, that is Sibai's regimen, which is not commonly used. In Sibai's regimen, we give 6 gram of loading dose instead of 4 gram. And we have to give in the infusion maintenance dose as 2 gram per hour. Due to high levels of toxicity, it is not given in many places. So clinical progress and investigation. Upon admission to ICU, her BP was 160/100 after the initial 20 milligram IV labetalol, and then subsequent dose of 40 milligram of IV labetalol was given. And within 10 minutes, the patient's blood pressure stabilized at 140/90, achieving target BP control. So all the comprehensive blood investigations, including CBC, LFT, RFT, LDH, coagulation profile were reviewed, and it was found to be within normal limits, indicating no significant organ damage or coagulopathy. Following stabilization of blood pressure, the patient was taken up for emergency lower segment cesarean section due to antepartum eclampsia with an unfavorable cervix. So we all know that for antepartum eclampsia, delivery is the rule. That's all. So irrespective of the gestational age, we have to deliver the baby. So since the patient had an unfavorable cervix at 32 weeks of gestation, we had performed a lower segment cesarean section, and since her GCS was not so good and she was in a disoriented state, we couldn't give spinal, and she was taken under general anesthesia. She delivered a preterm male baby weighing 1.4 kg with Apgar scores of 7/10 and 8/10, and the baby was admitted to the NICU for specialized preterm care. The intraoperative period was uneventful. Post surgery, she was shifted back to ICU and she was placed on elective ventilation for 24 hours. And MACSELF infusion was continued for 24 hours. Her BP remained stable, and it was controlled with IV labetalol infusion. So continued MACSELF therapy was given for 24 hours post-delivery to ensure ongoing seizure prophylaxis. Vigilant monitoring of patellar reflex, respiratory rate, urine output was maintained to assess the magnesium toxicity and overall recovery. Normal investigations, all her blood work were within normal limits, and patient was successfully extubated after 24 hours with stable vitals. And MRI was done on post-op day 3 for ruling out neurological sequelae, and it was normal. And in the remaining post-operative period, the patient's blood pressure was well controlled with tablet amlodipine 5 milligram BD. And as the patient is prone for CVT, DVT, thromboprophylaxis was given with injection heparin 5,000 units subcutaneous BD for 7 days. And she was discharged well on POD 14. And the counseling should be done on discharge. That is danger signs of imminent signs and symptoms of eclampsia to be explained, like headache, vomiting, blurring of vision, epigastric pain, and any other signs like breast engorgement, fever, all these things to be explained to the patient. And the importance of BP monitoring and strict adherence to antihypertensives has to be informed to the patient. And she has to come for regular AN checkups. So the key takeaways is the magnesium sulfate is a must for all patients as a measure of seizure prevention and control in patients with severe preeclampsia, eclampsia, and we have to continue it for 24 hours to prevent further any epileptic episodes. And delivery is done irrespective of gestational age in a case of eclampsia. Close monitoring of BP and signs of toxicity is needed. Thank you.
Aparna ma'am is there, no? Aparna? Aparna has joined, no? Karpagambal?
Yes, madam. She has joined.
Hi.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Dr. Aparna has joined, ma'am. She's there.
Not able to see you. Where are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, looking like a PG. That's why I'm not able to suddenly see you. How are you, Aparna?
Yeah, I'm very good, very good. So
Yeah.
sorry, I
You're
was
due
just,
to me. You're due to me, remember?
yes, definitely. Next week we'll do that.
Can I introduce Aparna ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, please. Go ahead.
Doesn't need an introduction. She's from AIMS. You must have heard her talking at almost all the conferences. And she's a professor and unit head, obstetrics and gynec AIMS New Delhi, fetal medicine specialist with expertise in fetal intervention. And her areas are in high-risk pregnancy, fetal therapy, simulation-based teaching, which is very, very important now, the recent NMC guidelines, and quality improvement initiative, Lakshya, respectful maternity care, AI and digital innovation. Yeah, you have started a AI in healthcare. Yeah, good. And lots of awards, Javeri Award, Rajat Rai Award, Sun IAEZ Traveling Fellowship, Foxy Imaging Science Committee, Foxy Junior Korean Award, and Kamina Orator. Yeah, lots and lots to go. And Aparna is the right person to give us insight. Both regiments, both are practiced throughout India. Aparna, please.
Yeah, so very good evening to all of you, and thank you, Vijaya ma'am, for having me here, and thank you, Dr. Karpangal. So basically, I think I missed the first part of the case. I was a little late in joining, but I heard the second case, and I think the role of magnesium sulfate is very, very crucial in the management of preeclampsia and eclampsia. So I thought maybe that, I'll review a little bit about the various regimes. So I will not speak too much because you've already talked about, how each of the regimes are given. And I think if we do not know about how this thing is given, I think we are not fit to pass the post-graduation. So I think that is something which is very, very basic. First of all, across centers, I think people have different protocols. Some give IM, some give IV. But the basic requirement, I think, for giving IV is having an infusion pump. So the facilities which do not have an infusion pump, they probably prefer to give IM. And facilities which do have an infusion pump, I think they would prefer to shift to IV regime because it is definitely easier for the patient, rather than taking IM injections. It's actually better. So if you look at the evidence of IM versus IV, so that's the first question. That if you compare Zuspan versus Pritchard, which is better? And the next question, of course, is there anything which is better than both? Right? That's the next question. So when I looked into the literature for comparison of, Zuspan versus, I'll just, share my screen. I think you'll have to allow me to share. Acha, that's fine. I think I can share. So I'll just, share the screen. So it's important to understand a little bit of a pharmacokinetics of magnesium sulfate. I don't know if this was covered, but what is important to understand is that magnesium sulfate is almost exclusively excreted by kidneys. So this is renotoxic. And having said that, it's also important that if you do not know the renal function, you can still give the loading dose. So that's important to understand. And within the first 24 hours, the 90% of the dose is excreted and the therapeutic levels is up to 3. The first warning sign that has been already discussed is loss of patellar reflex and the cardiac arrest. So I don't know how many of us are actually doing magnesium levels, but in cases that we are suspecting magnesium toxicity, we do get the magnesium levels done. But if we are giving a general loading dose in a patient who has a good renal function, we do not expect to have a magnesium toxicity if the urine output is all right. So I think that's something that we need to understand, that the renal functions are very crucial when we are giving magnesium sulfate. So, and why pharmacodynamics is important is that what is the mechanism of action of magnesium sulfate? It is by actually depressing the CNS and the vascular endothelium both. So it depresses the CNS and it is also causes vasodilatation. So these are the two mechanisms by which it acts, and it actually stops the seizures and it also prevents further seizuring. So both of the actions are important, and we need to understand that it's important for eclampsia and it's also important for prevention of seizures in severe preeclampsia. So when you look at the role of magnesium sulfate in eclampsia, it has been seen that, it reduces the mortality rate by 50%. So there is no two ways to say that it is the drug of choice. And why I have written some of the evidences, as from the postgraduate point of view, these evidences are important, right? So this Lucas et al., this is one of the biggest studies which actually looked at magnesium sulfate versus phenytoin. And it was after this study that phenytoin was stopped from being given in eclampsia. And I think I saw one comment which said that we do not intubate in case of seizures. You will not intubate in case of seizures. You will let the seizures to pass away. You will intubate if it is a status epilepticus, right? If there is a status eclampticus, it is not subsiding, the seizures are not subsiding. So we do not need to treat the seizures, right? If a patient is come to you with seizuring, let the seizure pass away. Then you give magnesium sulfate that there are no recurrence of seizures, right? So this was the point after which phenytoin was stopped from being given in eclampsia. So this is an important part, and it was an important study. Another thing, and the Cochrane review looked into the role of magnesium sulfate versus placebo or no anticonvulsant group, and they said that it reduces the mortality by 50%. This was in eclampsia. So what about the prophylactic use in severe preeclampsia? So these are some of the important trials that as postgraduates you are supposed to know, that it is not just the Pritchard and the Zuspan, but the Dhaka regime, which is a low dose regime, which is a 10 milligram loading followed by 2.5 milligram given 4 hours. So this was equally effective in reducing recurrent seizures. Then there was an RCT in Nepal, which said that a single loading dose versus the standard regime is as effective. And the PIPES trial. The PIPES trial is also important because in 2018, this is done by a team from PGI Chandigarh in India, in which they only gave a single shot of magnesium sulfate, not followed by any maintenance regime. And they said that it was almost equally effective as the Dhaka trial, the Dhaka regimen of low dose magnesium sulfate. Now, why are we looking into all of these regimens of magnesium sulfate? Because we know that, the healthcare, there might be restrictions or restrained healthcare settings where you might not be available. So as postgraduates, while it's important to know your actual Pritchard and Zuspan regime, it's also important to know that there are other low dose regimes and the studies which have been done, which look at the other regimes which may be viable. So in terms of head-to-head comparison of Zuspan versus Pritchard, when I looked into the literature, there are no studies which are very good quality or very high quality studies. But it has been seen that, the Pritchard regime would have more maternal complications. It's kind of obvious because, you are giving an IM injection which has more problems. And because it's an intermittent dosing rather than intravenous, the drug levels actually fluctuates more as compared to the intravenous dosing. So it has been seen that the complications are a bit more, the maternal mortality is a little higher, the toxicity levels are a bit higher, and the eclampsia levels are slightly higher in certain reports. Having said that, I would say that the level of evidence is not very high in those terms. So if people are happy using Pritchard, they can use Pritchard. But if they have a facility for giving IV, it is a preferable regimen in terms of, patient acceptability, physician, administration. Again, in terms of recurrent seizures, Zuspan has a lower recurrence, Pritchard has a higher recurrence, toxicity is higher. Magnesium level is, both of them generally have a lower level, but in most of the studies, it has been seen that the Pritchard regime is slightly does a lower level and Zuspan is a slightly better regimen. So we follow the Zuspan regime at all times since almost 10 years now. So we do not give Pritchard regime anymore. And anybody who has an access to intravenous access and can provide that should probably given Zuspan. Now, having said that, I will just put in the other things, which is the CBI or the low dose Dhaka CBI protocol, which is the 4 to 6 gram IV followed by 2 gram IV, which is the double of the Zuspan. So this was the CBI protocol, and the low dose Dhaka regime, which is 10 gram over 15 minutes, followed by 2.5. So this is the low. Instead of you give 14 loading, you give 10 gram followed by 2.5, which is almost half of the, the Pritchard regime. So this is the low dose Dhaka regime that we know. Now, how we know that these things are effective is that, there have been a lot of studies on the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics of the magnesium sulfate, and which they have looked into. So this is the Zuspan regime of the intravenous regime, and they have gone on to compare that with lower doses, like, followed up only for say 8 hours, given for 8 hours, and lower loading doses. And what they have found is that all of them, the magnesium levels for the required period of say 10 to 12 hours, which is maintained in the body, is more or less the same. So this was an interesting paper in which they have compared all the available and the hypothetical regimens, and also the commonly used lesser dose regimens, both the alternate IV and the alternate IM regimens. And they found that if you look at the low dose regimens, the magnesium levels which have been achieved after the dosing, say for example, if you are using a 4 gram IV, 10 gram IM, so this is a 14 gram loading followed by the Pritchard regimen. But even if you give a 10 gram IM directly without a 4 gram loading, or you decrease the loading dose, even then you are able to achieve the magnesium level, which is useful in prevention of seizures. So this is the basis for why we would like to shift to a lower dose of magnesium sulfate. Maybe what the hypothesis is that it is the loading dose which is extremely important, and maybe that the maintenance may not be required for 24 hours, which actually causes the toxicity and the complications. So let us keep that in mind. But having said that, I would say that for the purpose of the postgraduates here, for the purpose of your MD exam, please remember that you should know how to give Zuspan, how to give Pritchard regime, and it is up to the place whether they can give Zuspan or not. If not, stick to the Pritchard regime. Dilution, how to achieve the dilution, how to monitor the patient on magnesium sulfate, until when to continue. If you are given a question on head-to-head a comparison of Zuspan and Pritchard, I have discussed the point that maybe Zuspan is slightly better, but then again, it is up to the availability of facilities. And as far as possible, even the low dose regimes are becoming more and more, acceptable, and that we must keep that in mind. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Aparna ma'am. Vijaya ma'am, your inputs, ma'am.
Aparna, is there what are the indications for monitoring the serum magnesium level? Is there any indication at all, or just highlight?
I would say that, serum magnesium levels are, indicated in women who have a compromised, suppose you have given a renal function, suppose a chronic hypertensive, or in women who have a background renal function, which is slightly creatinine, which is slightly raised, and you have given a loading dose in that situation. Or in women in whom, suppose you see that the patellar reflexes are not there, and suppose it may be a false finding. So in that case, we immediately send a magnesium level to see that, okay, is that a toxicity, or is that like a false finding, that can I go for the next dose or not? So I would delay that particular dose to look at the magnesium levels, but it is not a routine finding. So if I'm suspecting a toxicity, it is better that we get a magnesium level done.
Is there any criteria that once you start the patient either on Zuspans or a Pritchard, we should deliver?
No. So let me tell you now, this is a very double-edged sword kind of a question, right? Now, this is called the intercurrent management of eclampsia. So even women with eclampsia, if you're in a center which can manage everything and it's a very preterm case, so rule of thumb for all postgraduates, eclampsia deliver, right? So do not confuse with all of these things. But in a woman who's severe preeclampsia and you think that she's having impending eclampsia, you have given her magnesium sulfate. And after giving magnesium sulfate, for some reason, maybe things are all right, and you have controlled her blood pressure, she's on antihypertensives, and you're carefully monitoring her with a daily blood counts, daily blood, CBC, LFT, KFT, and everything is all right. you can possibly think of doing a conservative management. Magnesium sulfate is not an indication for delivery. Impending eclampsia and the maternal condition is an indication for delivery. Right.
Absolutely.
So for your exam purpose, if you think it's severe preeclampsia, more than 34 weeks, give magnesium, deliver. Right. There is no confusion. Less than 24 weeks, severe preeclampsia, deliver. Between 24 to 34 weeks, right? That is when there is a gray area. You try to control the blood pressure with 2 antihypertensives, with 3 antihypertensives. If there is a sign of impending eclampsia, you give magnesium sulfate. After that, if you think that the patient is kind of okay and you're sitting on the patient is admitted, you're twice a day, you're monitoring, and you think that you can take the risk and a chance, then be very careful when you're answering this question in the exam, because it is an individualized management. It is a risk that the patient and the doctor should be willing to take together. Because pre-eclampsia is like, sitting on the fence. The mother can deteriorate like anything. And if she goes into HELP or other complications of pre-eclampsia, it is life-threatening. So when we are answering that question, it's a very tough thing to answer.
Is there a choice of anesthesia when you have given magnesium sulfate when you are taking for a cesarean section? Do
Right.
you
So
still consider spinal or GA?
yeah. So first thing for this, I typically want to answer that let the choice of anesthesia be the choice of the anesthetist. I think that's a very safe answer to say, and we always involve our anesthetist in the decision making, right? Per se, severe preeclampsia is not an indication for general anesthesia. If the platelet counts are all right, there is no indication not to give regional anesthesia. So it's not a contraindication if the patient is in status, right? If there is eclampticus, which is she's uncontrolled seizures, unstoppable, then you will intubate anyway. But in present day obstetrics, nothing is an absolute indication for general anesthesia. We must think about it, because GA will complicate the mother. So if we have time, if it's a category 1 cesarean section, even if the fetal heart is okay for a while, you can do a single shot spinal. So that's what we say. We must think about it, discuss with the anesthetist, and think again. It's not like an absolute indication.
Yeah.
My last question, nifedipine and magnesium sulfate.
Again, so it's a very tricky situation, and these two drugs are given very commonly. Right. So I would say that, most of the women who are on 2 antihypertensives would be on nifedipine, right? So that's something that you will need to figure out. So although it is not like an absolute contraindication, it is a relative contraindication. Also, when you are dealing with situations like twins, right, or polyhydramnios, so anything which is aggravating, these women will land up in pulmonary edema. Nifedipine causes pulmonary edema, magnesium sulfate causes pulmonary edema. So anything which is coming together will cause pulmonary edema. So if you have a woman who's already on 2 antihypertensives and she has signs and symptoms of impending eclampsia, you will give magnesium sulfate, right? But you will need to monitor her. You will need to monitor her chest. You will need to monitor her SATs. Look that her saturation is maintained. So it is an intensive care monitoring which is required. And we need to be on a high alert that she's on nifedipine and I'm giving her magnesium sulfate. So that is something that it is a very, very high alert kind of a situation.
In AIIMS, are you giving hydralazine?
Here sometimes we have the availability of hydralazine. It's like off and on. So we have given in the past, but currently it's not available. But otherwise, yes, we have given. But we are giving Labetalol. IV Labetalol is the first choice.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. There are a few chat questions which I would read across. From Dr. Preeti, was she not intubated as she came staging? Was it GA during cesarean section? As said. I think madam answered. So
yeah, I will not intubate any patient of eclampsia. So do not touch any patient of eclampsia. As discussed, just put her on a lateral position, maintain that her airway is clear.
Fine.
In fact, do not even catheterize her till you have given magnesium sulfate. I mean, that is something which is extremely important, because that will lead to another episode of seizure. So that is very, very important. GA, yes, as I said, it's not absolutely essential. It is up to the, general condition, platelet count, all of those things.
Yeah.
It is the same.
Yeah. So usually we put her left hand pushing, put her mouth gap so that the tongue doesn't fall backwards, and just wait for the fit to pass off. But in the meantime, we load the magnesium sulfate and give her the medications. And from Dr. Soundarya, is Pritchard and Jussman regimen loading dose the same? So, Dr. Soundarya wants to know, is the loading dose the same for both?
Yeah. So the loading dose is basically 4 gram IV, right? So in the Zospan, so 4 gram IV loading is the same.
Same.
And because Pritchard has a 10 gram IM, so that is given as IM, but the loading IV loading is the same.
Same.
Now in the maintenance, you start with 1 gram IV per hour as a continuous infusion. So you can say that the IV loading is the same, but instead of IM here, you will continue with the IV infusion.
1 gram per hour.
Yes.
Yeah, so the IV loading is always the same. So
Yes.
the IM and the maintenance doses, actually they
Yes.
change.
Yes.
From Dr. Asha, can you explain the diluted infusion of maintenance dose in Zuspan regimen?
So it's basically so basically it is given like, 1 gram of magnesium sulfate, which is given as IV per hour. 1 gram per hour it is given as IV. So exactly, I think it is the preparation is mentioned. I think one of you did mention on how to make the preparation.
Preparation, correct.
Rajapriya showed very well all
Yeah.
the preparation. Yeah, beautifully.
So it's basically what you have to remember is, always remember one thing is, whenever you see a magnesium sulfate vial, you have to see weight by volume, right?
Yeah.
It's basically 50% weight by volume or 20% weight by volume.
Yeah.
50% weight by volume, that means if you have a 2 ml magnesium sulfate, it is 1 gram.
1 gram.
So 2 ml has 1 gram. So that's how you calculate. And, so it is 50% weight by volume. So similarly for, so accordingly you must put in. So always, it is a good practice that do not leave this onto the sisters. Make it yourself. So that is, it always a good idea. And the IV infusion should be given by you.
Yeah.
Do not leave it to the sisters. You should stand by the head of the patient.
After Akshay has come, sisters are more involved and they are only loading. They are very
Right. So I think it's a good idea to
Be with-
helps if you,
Help.
yeah.
So, Dr. Ishita, ma'am, which is the second best antihypertensive to give in case the patient does not respond to IV labetalol?
So I think it is a very good protocol which is there in an article by Leona Poon in 2020. Right. So here you should always see, you give first dose of IV labetalol, which is 20 milligram, 20 milligram, right? And then ideally we know 20, 20, 40, 40, right? But after you have given 3 doses, if he is not responding, 80 milligram IV labetalol you have given, if she is not responding, then you should switch over to nifedipine. Mix the other drug and do not go to the highest dose of labetalol after you've given a 80 milligram. So after you've given the initial labetalol, she's not responding, switch over to nifedipine, so that you are mixing and matching 2 different mechanism of action to bring down the blood pressure.
That's a very good take-home point. You don't have to go to the maximum dose of 220 milligram. After 3 doses, if the BP does not fall down, you can start nifedipine. Good point.
Yeah. So, Dr. Deepali wants to know, is there a time gap between the loading dose of magnesium sulfate and taking it for cesarean section? That's already answered, actually.
No, why? I mean, see, depends on why do you want to take her for a cesarean section. If there's a fetal distress, then you take her immediately. If the patient, there is no relation in that situation. I mean, you just give the loading dose. You need to give the loading dose slowly. I mean, that is, if that is what you're wanting to ask. The IV loading should be given slowly.
Whether there will be a potentiating action between the muscle relaxant and the maxer. That's what they want to know, I think.
I mean, it's fine. And anyway, I mean, it's not necessary to give a GA in the first place. So you are safe.
Yeah. So actually speaking,
Eclampsia, they will take immediately for section after the loading dose.
Again, that is what I'm trying to tell you here. Eclampsia is not an indication for cesarean section. In eclampsia, please induce labor. Recently, I was in another PG program and this lady had eclampsia and the student said, I will do a section. Why will you do a section? Why will you not induce her? I think that is again something that we need to understand. Eclampsia is not an indication for cesarean delivery. In fact, eclampsia women, they deliver very fast.
Quickly.
Please put a gel. Even if the cervix is unfavorable, the time limit from eclampsia to delivery is 12 hours. If the patient goes into active labor by 12 hours, it is well and good. If she doesn't go into labor by 12 hours, then you will do a cesarean section.
Agree.
So I think that's another thing that is extremely important to understand.
They were
There is
all
no hurry. Eclampsia is not an emergency. Eclampsia is an emergency for airway management. Eclampsia is not an emergency for delivery.
Agreed, ma'am.
they were all trained to wait for 6 to 8 hours. 12
Yes.
hours, little newer concept.
Yeah,
Aparna,
I mean, I completely agree with you, madam, because a lot of times when there are patients with renal disease complicating pregnancy, SLE, all those people where they have severe preeclampsia with, high chronic hypertension with superimposed preeclampsia, their BP will, most of them will be high. And when they come with a severe preeclampsia, we give Maxel, even with impending signs, wait. If steroids have not been given, we give steroids cover and make the mother stay in the ICU, monitor the mother. Only if there is a maternal indication, then we take up for a delivery, whether it's induction or for cesarean section. So I think we have to understand the concept here is to control the fits and here control the blood pressure.
Yes.
Make sure the maternal condition is very safe. If there is any deterioration of the maternal condition, then things can definitely change, or the fetal condition, things can definitely be different. So
nitroglycerin. Nitroglycerin.
Yes. We have given nitroglycerin, especially in cases of postpartum,
mhm.
uncontrolled high blood pressure. We give them. If it
Yeah.
is not controlled with IV labetalol also, then we give postpartum, we've given NPG drips.
Yes, Dr. Soundarya says 5 gram IM alternate buttocks as loading dose in Pritchard need not be given. Very clear, ma, need not be given. See, in Pritchard
Yeah,
regimen is IV plus IM. In Zuspan regimen, it's only IV. Loading dose is IV, maintenance dose is IV. So there is no confusion here. Okay, Dr. Soundarya, hope you understand. The
Yes.
loading dose
I
buttocks,
hope so.
loading dose which we give in Pritchard need not be given in Zuspan regimen. Hope I think you are clear now, okay? And now Dr. Soundarya wants to know, suppose magnesium sulfate is given for impending eclampsia and the patient has been stabilized and has been kept on monitoring, but after 2 days she has headache and high BP 170, 120 and taken for LSCS, whether magnesium sulfate can be given again after LSCS?
Did you have this case or you're just imagining everything?
Imagine.
This is too much of imagination. I mean, I just hope that you don't have such kind of cases. No, but I think this is, we don't give magnesium sulfate again and again, whether it is for neuroprotection, whether it is for,
Correct.
but yes, I mean there. So let me tell you one very strange thing. I had been to, I was in Barcelona and I was with them and we were discussing maternal high risk. There are people who give magnesium sulfate for weeks together. So even if you have to give another dose, you can give for magnesium sulfate. So in Barcelona, the protocol is that if there is a magnesium sulfate, they give IV continuously and they keep monitoring magnesium levels. They give for days and weeks. I mean, that is one extreme of level of monitoring. We were all very horrified, but that's how they manage. So severe preeclampsia, the IV Zuspan regime goes on for days. So it's like, IV. But in this particular case, even I have not seen this kind of a situation very commonly. Even if you have to repeat a dose, because see, like I mentioned, within 24 hours, magnesium sulfate is cleared if your creatinine is okay. So if you think that there is another impending eclampsia, again, headache, if you have a headache and impending eclampsia, you might want to give magnesium sulfate because you want a neurosuppression, CNS depression to prevent eclampsia. So you can possibly give. So again, there are no guidelines. So this is an expert opinion from experience. So this might vary from place to place. That's why I said, have you seen this or this is a hypothetical case? So this is an individualistic approach. I may say yes, your madam may say no, nobody is correct or wrong in this situation.
Yeah. See, there are people who say, if you have already finished the entire regimen of 24 hours regimen of Maxelf and still the pregnancy is getting prolonged, there are few people who just give only the IV loading dose and just be done with it. But there are no strict guidelines, as madam says, that, that this should be done. As long as, your BP is under control and there are no further episodes, I think we are quite happy. I just have a few questions, Dr. Aparna. See, this Dhaka regimen, Nepal regimen. See, is it based on the BMI because all of us are frail and small made physically?
I don't know. I mean, see, there have been number of studies now. If you look at the number of studies which have been done, I'm sure this is irrespective of the BMI now.
Okay.
So it really says that the question is that probably it is just the loading dose which works.
Okay.
And plus it stays for 24 hours. So there
Yeah.
is may or may not be a need for the continuation. So, but then for practical purposes, let's not adopt anything right now. But I think there is
Yeah.
robust evidence to say that even low dose, single dose, loading dose, everything works.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we don't
We
know.
always have a Maxwell chart and where we monitor the respiratory rate, urine
Yeah,
output,
yeah.
deep and reflexes, pulse, blood pressure, everything is monitored periodically. And the only thing is, I mean, I always wanted to ask, I mean, compared to the Caucasians, we are definitely frail and small made, so maybe they had to devise their own low dose
Maybe,
regimens.
definitely. I mean, I can't say. And we are a different race altogether.
Yeah, we are definitely. And I mean, regarding the prolongation of pregnancy after Maxwell, I completely agree that, definitely we have given time for steroids and for the maternal fetal well-being. And if everything is stable, we have prolonged the pregnancies. And we have done quite a bit. And regarding anesthesia, we have usually our anesthetists are like, if there is severe preeclampsia, if the PT-INR is normal, they're very happy. Even if the patient is on Ecosprin 150, if the INR is normal, they are quite happy with spinal because they think
Yeah.
it's done. It
All
brings down the
every
blood pressure.
anesthetist will give spinal.
Yeah. It brings down the blood pressure, and more importantly, and it's the complications, general anesthesia are really avoided. Lung complications are definitely avoided with so much of
Absolutely.
edema
And
and
plus
other.
you might land up already on a brink of pulmonary edema. You'll precipitate
True.
so many other things. So I think it's always spinal is always better
Yeah, regional anesthesia.
for everybody.
And definitely thank you so much for this clarity on, eclampsia does not warrant delivery. You can always assess the Bishop score and do an induction of labor.
Yeah.
This is one thing which is very, very, I mean, I really consider this should be the take-home point for everyone in this. Okay. And one more question. She must have been induced now, no ma'am, for the above situation and after first ablation itself rather than monitoring only.
So basically there's an hypothetical situation
Yeah.
and discussion on it is going on.
Yeah, one after the other.
And one after the other, and then they want to induce. Acha, so somebody has said cesarean, so now they want to induce. Yeah. Look at the bishops.
Things we are
I
done.
think, as obstetricians, I think we should just
Yes,
we
please.
have our own thumb rule of, just take care of the mother.
Anyway, we are so struggling with Akritas now.
I just want to know, Juhi, are you following this regimen only? Or just
Ma'am, no, ma'am, we are following Zeuspan now.
okay. Because you presented, I was thinking,
No.
we are following. Okay.
I think we have to agree to this fact that, we have come a long way and we were giving Pritchard, but, the IM injection is a big thing, is a large volume also.
Painful for the mother.
Very painful. And I have seen gluteal abscess with the IM injection. So
Absolutely.
I think we just have to switch over to
inhuman, I tell you. It's inhuman.
Yeah.
But it is not been in the books, isn't it, Aparna?
What?
Udliyar and this.
I mean, they need to update themselves then.
Because in Williams, I think it is there.
Yeah.
Suspend is there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a time-tested regimen. There is no doubt about it. I think
Most of the examiners were asking, how do you prepare IV infusion and all? It's 48 ml and the infusion 2 ml per hour. They should be very thorough, and Rajapriya did that slide very well. I hope all the pages must have noted down that slide. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, definitely, there should always scope for innovation in science and technology. So I think we should go with IV because it's very comfortable.
Okay, we can close down now.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. I thank all the speakers.
Ma'am, I have a question to ask, ma'am.
Yeah, Zugi, please.
Ma'am, if the patient is in a status epilepticus and we have to intubate her and her heart rate, fetal heart rate is normal, so can we wait? Can we wait for, or can induce her, or we have to shift her for section under GA? Section under GA, ma'am.
If it is an IUD, that's a different thing. But if it is this thing, then you.
Rajapriya, you have any question?
Ma'am.
Thank
you, ma'am.
Thank you. It is a lot of insights into the basic concept. I know this is one of the basic things that we do as an obstetrician, and we learn as a final MBBS student, house surgeon, and also as a postgraduate. But I think we really have to be very clear with these concepts all throughout. Thank you so much, Dr. Juhi, Dr. Rajapriya, and Dr. Aparna. It was extremely useful, and I really thank you for all the answering all the questions and making things very clear for the delegates. Thank you, Vijaya ma'am. Thank you, Roxy.
Thank you, ma'am.
Shri Events for the platform, and thank you, everyone. Have a happy evening. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.